Okay, it is mock draft time. Now, I'm not on 4.0 or 8.0 or, I don't do a million mock drafts, okay? I can't wait to cover the draft. I'll be on with the NFL Network on night 1 and 2 with DJ, who's obviously great, Charles Davis, and Rich Eisen. So this is going to be my first mock draft. I will have a second on draft week, so pay attention for that. I'll have another podcast delivering a mock draft. Just so that you know, I think that it's valuable for the listener or if you're viewing this on YouTube. It is valuable to know how the person who builds the mock, how they're trying to build the mock. For me, it's really a combination of who the teams need, my big board, not necessarily predictive of who I think the team is going to take, but rather I'm trying to basically be like, if I'm the GM based on my board and their team needs and best player available and everything, that's how I build this. A lot of people get upset at me and they're like, there's no way this team would take that. Yeah, well, I would take that person, if I was that team. I also conduct trades in my mock draft. So we're going to have a couple of trades in this mock draft as we get all set. So that's just a little background, and here we go. With the number 1 overall pick after that trade, blockbuster trade, Chicago trades out. Carolina's on the clock. Carolina, in my estimation, and this is a razor-thin margin. We all know they're going quarterback. We all know who the 2 best quarterbacks are. Razor-thin margin, I'm going to give it to my best quarterback on the board for me, and that's Bryce Young, the quarterback at Alabama. As you guys know, I love Bryce and I love CJ. Both of these players are tremendous players, and I think that either of them could be or should be, if you want to say it that way, the pick at number 1. I think Carolina is going to get not only a great player, but a really good leader and a good person, regardless of who they take. Now, let me explain why I landed on Bryce Young. First and foremost, he processes information as well as any quarterback that I've seen in a long time at the college level. Okay, he's so quick in what he does, controlling and manipulating the game from the pocket, whether it's pre-snap or post-snap. And I think that's going to serve him so well as he goes into the next level, and he's going to have to play early. Generally speaking, guys that don't process information quickly in college or need to learn that talent once they get to the NFL have a very steep learning curve. The guys that succeed early in their careers in the National Football League at quarterback are the ones that can process information. And he does that as well as anybody. He's obviously accurate with the football. I think he's way more athletic than people even give him credit for. You see what he does manipulating the pocket on some of those throws. He can throw it from any platform. While his arm is not the greatest arm I've ever seen, he anticipates the downfield throw really well. So generally speaking, there's not a lot of downfield throws that are underthrown. So for all of those reasons, I take Bryce Young at Carolina. But again, this is not a knock on C.J. Stroud. I think he absolutely could be the pick, and that would be a great pick. However, in this mock draft, he's left for the Houston Texans at number 2. So now Houston's on the clock, and they're sitting there with the second pick in the draft, and C.J. Stroud is going to be the pick, the quarterback from Ohio State. And there's going to be zero controversy, or I guess I should say, what's the word? There's going to be no suspense with the number 2 pick. Regardless of who goes number 1, there's going to be some suspense there, I expect, unless there's something leaked draft week as we get closer to Kansas City. I do think that there'll be a little bit of suspense between the 2 players for that number 1 pick, although we should have a decent idea up at that point. There's going to be zero suspense with number 2 because whoever goes number 1, I believe that the other quarterback is going to go number 2. Now, there's a lot of talk that maybe Anthony Richardson is going to jump up there into the top 2. I don't see it because these other 2 guys are way too good and way further along in their development to pass him up. I think C.J. Stroud has a higher ceiling than Bryce Young, actually. Bryce, in my mind, might be a little bit of the safer pick, only in the sense that you know exactly what you're going to get, and from day one, he's going to be able to step in there and play right away and do it very efficiently. Now, CJ has some growth that's still left, which means he's got higher potential. So if you're going to take this pick based on potential, then I think CJ would probably go number 1 to Carolina. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, Joel, that doesn't make any sense. If you're taking it on potential, wouldn't it be Anthony Richardson? Well, it's just too far, right? Like, that's a bridge too far. CJ is so good. He's so clean from the pocket. He's accurate. He anticipates well. He controls the line of scrimmage. This guy was a consummate leader at Ohio State. He played his best game in that last game, even though it was a loss against Georgia, and he really proved his doubters, in particular those doubters that thought that he didn't move well enough in the pocket, he proved them wrong. So that's the pick that I like for the Houston Texans. I really love C.J. Stroud, and those two guys, I hope, will have great NFL careers moving forward. Then we get to number 3, and I think this is when the draft really gets good. Okay, so let's put ourselves in the draft. This is so C.J. Stroud gets called. Now the Cardinals are on the clock. Okay, Cardinals don't need a quarterback. They need defensive help, in particular after J.J. Watt's retirement. Like, they could use a pass rusher. Hey, there's one right there, right? There's one available. But Arizona, in that spot, holds a very valuable position, because on my board and a lot of boards, the quarterback position is really 3 deep, not 4 necessarily. And I know some people are really high on Will Levis, but it's really 3 deep. And once the first 2 guys go, now all of a sudden that pick becomes very valuable. And here's why. Because the Colts are at number 4, and everyone knows that they're in the quarterback market, right? They're probably going to take the 3rd quarterback if it lands to them at 4. Therefore, everybody else that needs a quarterback, everybody else, is going to be thinking to themselves, maybe we should trade up with Arizona. And Arizona is going to field those calls for 2 reasons. Number 1, they don't need the quarterback. And number 2, there's a depth of pass rushers in this draft that would make it comfortable to move down and say to yourself, yeah, we're going to get a really good edge rusher regardless of where we move. So now all of a sudden, I think the phones start blowing up. C.J. Stroud's taking his picture. He's got his hat on right there for the Houston Texans. And the trades start to happen, and I think one gets executed. Here's my favorite part, though. I actually think it's the Colts who sense the urgency more than anybody else. And they understand that Arizona is going to be willing to move down 1 pick, because then Arizona still gets what? Their best edge rusher, whoever that is. So Arizona can move down 1 pick, and the Colts can go box out everybody else in the quarterback market and move up 1 selection to number 3 and take that quarterback. To me, that makes a lot of sense. So that's the trade that takes place. The 3rd and 4th pick gets swapped. The Colts move up to number 3, and they take Anthony Richardson. So there's Anthony Richardson. We've got 3 quarterbacks taken in the first 3 picks, and the quarterback from Florida is headed to Indianapolis. Now, you know exactly how I feel about Anthony Richardson. He's got the highest ceiling of any of these guys. If he can figure all of this out, then what you're seeing in terms of his potential is a guy that could be the best player on the field regardless of who he's playing in the NFL. That's a big statement, and I totally understand that. However, look at his skill set, his arm strength, his athleticism, all of the things that he brings to the table, and it's very easy to see this guy being the best player on the field if he can polish some of those rough edges that we see, and some of his accuracy issues, maybe some of the processing issues. How quickly does he process information? Because it's not as quick as Bryce Young or C.J. Stroud. However, the Colts, they're going to need that quarterback, and I love that trade, and I love that scenario, and I can't wait until draft night for those types of scenarios. You see, it's not necessarily, for me, what teams get what players. It's the strategy involved with how teams are boxing out other organizations, getting to a spot where they get their guy based on their board. And for me, this one makes a lot of sense. So Anthony Richardson, I'm going to just continue to call him the Rubik's Cube. If you can figure out the Rubik's Cube, it's beautiful, and he could potentially be the best player on the field. Now, how many turns away is he from finished? We don't know. Is it 10? Is it 15? Is it 25? How difficult is it going to be for him to polish some of those things and become the type of player that he could potentially be? But I think that happens with Indianapolis, which means Arizona trades down to 4, and they get their best edge rusher on their board. Again, this makes so much sense to me. So Arizona is going to take their card up right after Richardson is taken, and they're going to put that card right on the podium, and it's going to say Will Anderson, outside linebacker from Alabama. I love Will Anderson. This guy is an absolute alpha. He's what you want in the locker room. He's going to be your captain by the time he's in his second or third year. That's the type of worker he is. When your best players are also your hardest workers, you've got something. And that's the exact style of player that Arizona can take here at number 4 in this trade scenario with Will Anderson. For the better part of 2 years, this guy has been the most dominant player in college football, in our sport. And I understand that quarterback's going to be the need and it's going to drive the top of the draft, but I really love Will Anderson's game. I think he's good against the run. I obviously think he's great rushing the passer, and he would help an Arizona defense that really needs him. So that would be the 4th pick in the draft.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoy that clip, make sure you click subscribe somewhere down here. From game highlights to exclusive interviews and rankings, we've got everything you need as a college football fan right here. College football on Fox.